Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to welcome you all to this very, I suppose, interesting webinar today with a very, let's say, interesting and open-minded title, which is Winter Coming to AI in Pharma? Great pleasure to welcome three pretty amazing panelists. So from my left to the right on this picture, we have Kuldeep, the founder and CEO of Biofourmis. We have Loubna, Bouarfa, the founder and CEO of Okra, and we have Gernot Weber with a very short title. So I will pass and skip the title and only say from Novartis. Really great pleasure to welcome you all. I would kindly like to ask each of you to introduce yourself and maybe to give a short answer on this question: is winter coming to AI in pharma? So maybe we can start with Kuldeep from left to the right. Hello, Kuldeep.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dario. And hi, everyone. I'm Kuldeep, founder CEO of Bioformas. Bioformas is a digital therapeutics company. We are based in Boston, and we build, clinically validated software-based therapeutics for patients suffering from complex chronic condition. The entire mission at Bioformas really is how do you improve patient outcomes while minimizing the cost and burden of care by really delivering precise intervention at the right time. And the way we do that is by using connected devices and mobile apps to collect active passive data from patients. We use a lot of data science and machine learning to be able to predict exacerbation or decompensation ahead of time, and use software-based therapeutic intervention to intervene and integrate that eventually into the clinical care pathways. Primarily as a company, we are focused on cardiometabolic diseases and oncology. A very high-level overview of the company. We are based in Boston, 130 employees globally, offices in 4 countries, raised over 45 million in venture funding. And in fact, we work with primarily large biopharmas or pharmaceutical companies, over 7 of them right now, and over 15 health systems. And primarily what we offer while working with pharma really is companion therapeutics. So we build companion therapeutics way early, all the way from phase 2 with a specific pharmaceutical therapy. We offer a platform for clinical trials, and finally, a service we call as Pill Plus, where we wrap a service around the existing pharmaceutical therapy to really be able to drive better outcomes in patients.
Thank you, Kuldeep. Loubna, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dario. I'm Loubna Bouarfa. I'm a machine learning scientist turned entrepreneur, the CEO founder of Okra Technologies. So Okra is an artificial intelligence company for life sciences. So we built AI software that interface the interaction between life sciences and other stakeholders, such as HCPs, payers, and patients. So what we are an AI productization company, so which means maintaining and those systems and to deliver real value for patients through the connection and solving the problem about the lost translation in healthcare. So before founding Okra, I spent over 10 years in academia developing AI solutions for real-world applications, from the surgical room to patients, COPD patients, and using sensors and so on. And I'm also a member of the high-level experts group on AI, and one of the MIT technology innovators. Coming to your question, is this the winter of AI? I think we spoke many times about winters. We had a winter in the 70s when the introduction of expert systems, and we had another winter in the 80s when there was the business community's fascination with AI rose and fell in the end 80s because of the economic bubble. Now with the COVID, I think this is not a winter. I think this is the moment where we realize we need AI to bridge the communication, to reduce the burden of many products, and to bring the right products, and for healthcare to bring the right therapies to the right patients. So I think it's not the winter. I think it's the spring, and it's a great time for AI. It's an opportunity that COVID brings us to scale those technologies and boost the adoption way further than we thought.
Thank you, Loubna. Gernot, would you kindly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Very happy to do so. And first of all, thank you very much for having me here, and thanks a lot for the invitation to being part of this webinar over here. So my name is Gernot Weber. I'm a global program director in the team called Insights, Strategy and Design. And our mandate is basically bringing predictive analytics and advanced analytics to all of the functions across Novartis. With that team, we are part of the data science and AI function, which was founded, I think, 1.5 years, pretty much 1.5 years ago. Also showing really the commitment of Novartis to becoming a more data-driven data science company. In total, I'm with Novartis now for 6 years, having different functions. They are working as an external contractor, but then also working in IT and now in the data science unit. By education, I'm a physicist. I've worked in fundamental research, particle physics at CERN at the Fermi Lab a couple of years ago. So I think I can claim I was looking in data science and looking into big amounts of data before it came sexy in the recent years.
Thank you, Gernot. Thank you all for the short introduction. We can start with the official part. And first of all, I prepared a short presentation, which we together, of course, prepared for today's webinar. I would say that AI in overall is for sure maybe the biggest buzzword these days. But however, there is a problem with AI, and this problem is that people are really misinterpreting the term AI, because I would say it's very similar like the technology, for instance, blockchain, or actually cryptocurrency. Once you say blockchain, many people are just, let's say, equalizing this together with Bitcoin, which is completely wrong. And the very similar is also with AI. Once you say AI, immediately people look after robots, that they will took our jobs, or even worse, that they will exterminate us in the future, which is, as said, very wrong. If you ask me, I'm a personal huge fan and believer of AI. I personally think that this is actually the trigger of the new industrial revolution, and this actually, let's say that even digital transformation is just part of AI and not otherwise, like many people are claiming it. Going back to the roots, I remember one very brilliant movie about, let's say, AI, which really entered myself into this world of AI and robotics, etc. Most probably you saw that movie too. It's the movie I, Robot from 2004, where actually Will Smith had the major acting role, and it's actually quite bad in interpreting the whole story about AI, machine learning, robotics, etc. And this is maybe also setting these foundations, which I said, that people are misleading AI and thinking about only robotics, and that they will take something apart from us. I made some short research according to Google Trends just before this meeting. And according to 3 keywords which I researched: AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. According to Google Trends, back from 2004, when we had this I, Robot movie, until today, we see how the trending word AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning went from 2004 until today. And we see that the biggest peak was somewhere around 2012, which was actually, I would say, just the exit of the biggest financial crisis in the last 50 years. And now we see that this password is actually stabilizing itself, and that still we are, let's say, as Loubna said it very brilliantly, we are just entering in a spring of AI, and everybody just speaking about this term, and we see many positive use cases. I would like to mention just 2 very interesting use cases for pharma and life science, which are quite commercial, but I believe that many of you also saw those cases. This is the case of Tim Shaw, who together with the Google team, actually Tim Shaw is actually having the ALS disease, and most probably you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge, which was made only because of him. And together with the DeepMind team from Google, they have been able to replicate the voice of Tim Shaw, because ALS is a disease where you lose the voice. And together with the DeepMind team from Google, they replicated based on the previous interview or voice samples. They replicated the voice of Tim Shaw, and now he is able to speak again based on these data samples coming from the algorithm and machine learning AI from Google. And another very interesting project and use case is, for instance, the use case coming from Google in India, where they are doing the new, as they call it, Singh potential project. With the power of AI, they are preventing blindness in diabetic patients in the way that, based on the retina scan, Google is actually giving the guideline if this patient could potentially develop blindness or not. It's a very fascinating project as well, because according to the data which we are having, almost 400 million people are in potential problem to become blind because of diabetes. And this is, of course, another very interesting use case, which is just showing how AI is important and what are the capabilities and potential. But let's start with our webinar. The first question which I would like to ask to our participants is, what is actually AI and why it is so important to pharma? So I would say let's start from the very beginning. Let's start with the basic terms, and maybe we can start this time with Loubna. So Loubna, please, I would kind of like to ask you to start with this answer.
So what is AI? So I would refer to the definition we agree that the high-level expert group, that AI refers to systems that display intelligence behavior by analyzing the environment and taking actions with a high degree of autonomy. So, so for example, now you mentioned the misconfusions, the misconceptions. If we look to pharma life sciences, a lot of machine learning advanced methodologies are used for studies, either early in the drug development or later in the real world studies. Those are not artificial intelligence systems. Those are advanced machine learning studies models that is used within an epidemiological context. But what is AI is a system that can learn, adapt from data. Data can be coming from sensors and can be coming from longitudinal data that's refreshed on a continuous basis. So if we look at it, it's just like human beings learning from experience, mimicking the way we learn from the past as you know, as we navigate the world around us. And the importance of these systems lies. There are, of course, a wide range of spectrum, but if you look to the most important element to society is about automation of mundane tasks that takes us a lot of time to do. And in the past, if you look how AI starts, and we talked about the winters, it started as expert systems, as rule-based systems, and we had the winter in the 80s, and then we got back again to rule-based logic. But then with the computing power, with the investment in technology, we moved to probabilistic learning. And that's what we call the fourth industrial revolution. That's what's been called at the World Economic Forum. That's what's been called the new electricity. That's what's going to reshape the jobs that we know today. So what does it mean for pharma, where this AI will add value and improve healthcare and the ecosystem as we know it? It's on different levels. If we look into automation for researchers, from early drug development to the launch, the most time they spend on is scrolling through the literature or doing experiments to find, you know, the best compounds. A lot of work goes in repetitive tasks. So how can we replace that? How can we provide or filter out only the right information they can proceed with? And it's already been used, machine learning algorithms to design and automate drug development pipelines, to guide and speed up the drug discovery and preclinical studies. but it goes even beyond that. This is the not the low hanging fruit. This is the high hanging fruit. If you look to clinical trials, the way it's run today, randomized clinical trials, I don't even go about the methodology, because it was based on very hard theorems in mathematics around the central limit theorem, which is considered as the gold standard, but still it requires impossible requirements. It requires no bias in the data, and correlated samples. That's why we randomize, but it is always hard to make it in practice, and that's what makes our clinical trials mundane and long process. And if we see now with the COVID, for example, we've got the learning, we want to speed these clinical trials, we want to get the vaccines quickly. So, and this is all because of the central limit theorem. So I don't want to blame the theorem, because it's an amazing one, but I want to say that there are adaptive ways to run clinical trials faster using machine learning. We have adaptive clinical trials. We can also use machine learning to generate protocols that are faster. So there is a huge opportunity to revolutionize clinical trials with machine learning, and we need to move away from that classical framework and accept this adaptive approach. So once the drug is launched, and now we are talking about real world, we have teams in pharma companies, medical teams, that they need to drive the communications with investigators, with the key opinion leaders, so that their interaction leads to new revolutionary ideas for new drugs in the pipeline, but also to bring these new drugs that are developed to the right patients. So how can we support those teams to find out the right information in the scientific literature, so we can drive those communication faster and save the time that normally this interaction takes to be able to bring this drug to the patient in the real world. So once we have the drug ready for launch, then we need to get it to the countries. We need to get it to Germany, we need to get it to the UK, France, the US, and that's market access professionals. They need to prepare the submissions, they need to show the right proof, that data, prepare well for the negotiation process. And their job is so tough. They need to spend a lot of times researching clinical trials, look into the different submission by the different payers. And also there is a lot of uncertainty in the process. So using artificial intelligence there, and I can talk later maybe about one of our systems where it learns from all the submission data, it learns from all the clinical trial literature to filter out the right information. Those professionals can communicate to the payers and get the drug. And finally, where I see for pharma and the importance why AI for pharma is, how can we reach to the patient? If I am a patient, I've been moving in Europe from one place to another, how can I be confident that when there is a drug for my disease, that I will get it? When there is a new drug that was going to help me, that I will get it. Same for now with COVID. When there is a new vaccine, how can we make sure that everyone is, it's a fair world, that everyone can get it? And I think that part, it's not that easy, because first we need to educate doctors about this new treatment. With COVID, it's easy because everyone is looking at it, but there are rare diseases or disease areas where you need to educate. And that's the role for the commercial teams, that they need to, rural and urban areas, they need to go to doctors and tell them the right information. So when there is a mom living in Scotland in a rural area, that she still can get the same drug that someone in central London can get, because they've got access in the UK. So, and being able to identify those sites and those doctors to leverage data and machine learning here to make sure that those patients will get it. So I think this is for now the crucial things in pharma. So how we can solve the communication problem between those stakeholders, because once we've solved this, we're going to make strong healthcare ecosystem, and we're going to reduce the time spent in all those communications, so that we can move to the next challenge, get into precision medicine. If we don't solve this and try to say this is not a problem, let's get to precision medicine now, we are fooling ourselves. And we are basically saying, guys, healthcare system cannot get this done. Let's find a way how to replace it completely, which is, I think, out of questions especially here in Europe. So I think we need to face the big elephant in the room and solve the communication problems within the stakeholders first.
Thank you, Loubna. Very interesting insight. Gernot, would you like to give your opinion about that?
Yeah, sure. And to be honest, I absolutely agree with your statement. I mean, I think AI is also one of those buzzwords which is overly utilized at the moment, and many things are packed under just this big umbrella. But it's also, I mean, it's a broad field. You have different challenges to solve, leveraging different technologies. All of those fall basically under the umbrella of being artificial intelligence. So machine learning, natural language processing, the result of chatbots, all of that is really all is part of AI. And I think if you have asked 10 people, you probably get 12 different answers to this question. And I also think the problem space is changing. I mean, what we considered as AI 20 years ago is not really considered as super intelligent nowadays. And who could imagine what happens basically in the next 20 years then? So from my point of view, in general, any machine mimicking a human decision-making process can be considered as an AI. So for me, the result in the end between AI and human intelligence is pretty much the same. You get a decision, but the way how you get to this decision is very different. So let's take an example which is quite well-known example as a chess computer. I mean, those are established then since the 60s, last 1,000 years. When you have a chess computer, it perceives directly and is acting directly on what it sees. It creates simulations and probabilities about outcomes, about the upcoming moves, but it doesn't know anything about the past, and it also doesn't need to know anything about the past. I would say this decision-making process is very different to whatever people I know and interact with. However, still, I mean, for this specific problem, I know very few people who are really able to beat a chess computer. So coming back a little bit to the statement, the chess computer does make a decision, and it's not distinguishable from what a human would do. But the reasoning behind it and coming to it and being completely unbiased by experience and by behavior is a very different way to get there. And I think this is also important to keep this in mind all the times. Then regarding applicability, I think all areas which involve pattern recognition by observing large amount of data are really prone to be substituted by AI. So ingesting millions of data samples, ingesting millions of images, detecting anomalies out of that, it's a thing where AI and machine learning can rise and shine. Or actually already has risen and is shining and is, I think, superior against most humans looking into those images. Of course, considering the availability of training data, like there are also applications where people are looking into, but now you get to a very limited amount of images which are out there. All of them have been taken under different conditions. They might have different features. I mean, for example, I don't know, when you have images of the skin, you have different skin tones, different resolutions of those images. Then it's very, very challenging for an algorithm to really understand what kind of pattern should it actually look for. And so for such kind of problems, there's a diminishing advantage of things. And I think this is also very important when we are socializing where to apply AI and where not. I mean, like 2-3 years ago, everyone got very excited about AI and was saying, well, great. I mean, we just make all of our data available to a deep learning algorithm, and it's going to tell us where we're going to run with the business in 2 years. And that's not going to be the case. I mean, we still have to be very conscious about our own decisions. And there's things where AI can support us. There are also things where AI is superior in creating the basis for our decisions. But it's not, at least not right now, until we reach singularity, going to solve all our problems. And I think this also shows a little bit the general disconnect or at least I very often see between the theoretical application of things, So the things we read in papers, we at conferences, those are great things, and those are soon to be coming to us. But when we talk about real-world application nowadays with messy data, or at first still having issues with very traditional lockdown systems to actually make the data available, it's still a challenge to really basically develop what we could do from a technology point of view with the daily life problems we're having at the moment. So all of that, I think, is a snapshot of the moment. So all of that is going to resolve, but it's probably not going to resolve as fast as we are wishing that this is going to solve. And I think also a very good example is the very traditional and very well-known muffin or puppet example, where you have basically a machine telling you from millions of ingested images whether this is a muffin you're seeing or it's a puppet you're seeing. And for such kind of things, absolutely perfect and applicable, because there is this amount of data available to train the algorithms. But if you had like only 5 different images available with 5 different fur colors, I think the results would not be what you get nowadays. But I think the good thing is we are continuously learning and improving in pharma. We are learning how to make this data available. We are also learning how to really phrase the problems we are trying to solve. And we are also learning for which problem is it really superior, and what are probably the areas where we need to hold back a little. So for example, I was impressed myself by the things which you can now get for disease diagnosis, for example. I had hand-foot-mouth disease 2 years ago, and there's a small company from Berlin having a mobile companion, basically, an app you can launch, and it starts to ask you questions, first of all, the typical things about age and gender and such kind of things, and then more general questions. But in that case, with this disease, it took the AI 6 or 7 questions to find out and diagnose exactly what I had, and I think this is quite impressive. Mm-hmm. Besides that, I think this also throws up a lot of questions regarding in terms of data ownership, about the data privacy. All of that are, I think, also things we need to be very well aware of, that we are in the responsibility to answer those questions, or be at least part of panels to answer those questions. I think regarding the applications, the other applications, we're going to have some time in the upcoming questions. I don't want to take too much of airtime also for the other panelists to answer this question.
Gernot, Kuldeep, would you like give your brief answer about this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll keep it very short. So I think if you look at from my perspective, I think AI for me is systems ability to really interpret data or external data, learn from that data, and use those learnings to achieve some specific goal or a specific task through certain sort of adaptation. Just to put it in context and give few examples, initially when you monitor a patient, let's say you capture vital signs, and clinicians used to look at vital signs by saying, heart rate 70 to 90 is normal, 90 to 120 medium risk, and using certain thresholds. But nowadays, home monitoring and out of hospital ambulatory monitoring using continuous monitoring sensors is significantly growing, and using those traditional threshold values might not work because contextual information is not taken into consideration. And one of the applications what AI offers in this case is really being able to learn or capture continuous data, learn the physiology, and build personalized signatures for individuals, which essentially takes context into consideration and dynamically keeps learning and looks at those patterns which might predict changes in physiology, which could potentially indicate decompensation in patients, recovery in patients, etc. Primarily for pharma, I think there is huge applicability across the whole drug development process, all the way from early phase drug development to running clinical trials. And we have been involved in a number of clinical trials and many other companies as well, where studies are being designed, especially those early observational exploratory studies, where you essentially need to divide the study into two different parts. You're continuously collecting the data and you're adapting. Let's say you're building a predictive model for migraine detection, and you do the study by monitoring a patient for 90 days or maybe 6 months. You essentially are using the first 50% of the monitoring days to continuously learn based on the annotations and based on the data, and essentially prospectively validate that for the next duration. Of course, the second key important application, again within the clinical trial, is discovery and identification of new novel biomarkers, especially physiology biomarkers. And if there is a huge push from the FDA on this, and essentially last year there was a guidelines which FDA put out together, saying that clinical trials take a long time, and that's the reason drug approvals take 7-8 years, because we look at hard outcomes like hospitalization, mortality. How can we look at more patient-centric outcomes? But they didn't define what actual patient-centric outcomes mean. But depending on the disease areas, these outcomes can be things like quality of life, functional capacity, especially in patients with heart failure, and really having a huge data lake and an AI which could essentially be able to identify these novel biomarkers early enough, even in those clinical trials, could speed up the huge process and endpoints. And finally, I would also say that in this COVID situation, we have been involved, and you have seen multiple publications come out in very high impact fact journals, where the people in China, or clinicians and researchers in China, have been using AI and a lot of multi-dimensional data to be able to learn more about the disease. And especially when you have a pandemic like COVID break, so much is unknown, and we all are trying to learn. Clinicians are trying to learn. Of course, pharma companies, essentially want to know more about the disease so that they can, design studies, design treatments, etc. And having an ability to collect multi-dimensional data all the way from physiology to labs, imaging, so that you are holistically looking at the data to learn more about the disease. But more than that, there are ways to use AI to solve inefficiencies in the healthcare system. As you have seen today, in the US at least, emergency rooms are just getting overflooded. And there is very little space, especially in critical care. And how do you essentially triage patients to decide who is going to get the right amount of care in the hospital versus being able to send certain patients at home and bring that level of care at home? And having again a mechanism to essentially use first maybe 24 or 48 hours of continuous data collected to be able to build predictive models which could predict if the patient is going to decompensate potentially or exacerbate, or patient is going to improve, would again give us a huge triaging tool to be able to solve for these inefficiencies.
Thank you, Kuldeep. Moving forward to the next question, and partly already got the answer on that. And the question is the role of AI in pharma and life science, and what are the real use cases? Because here I would say we'll hear some very interesting use cases, especially, for instance, even some of the panelists are fighting with AI against COVID-19. So maybe we can start with Kuldeep, who actually answered on the previous question as well just recently. Kuldeep, would you like to?
Absolutely. So I think just to give you a little bit background about what we are doing, to help the patients with COVID. Sometime in end of January, early February, we put together a platform because our platform is customizable. So a platform which can essentially capture continuous physiology data 24/7 using wearable, a clinical grade wearable, which we have from an acquisition we did last year called Averion. It's worn on the upper arm. It has the ability to capture over 15 different physiological parameters, including some critical aspects like temperature, continuous pulse oximetry, respiration rate, continuous heart rate, etc. A mobile companion app for the patients to be able to report their symptoms, be able to essentially record their cough levels using to do voice analytics on it, to track progression, and communication via text and video for the patient with the clinicians. Of course, we tailored our analytics platform specifically for COVID. Early models, but continuously kept evolving that. And finally, a clinical care dashboard for clinicians to intervene and manage. So essentially, specifically for right now, what we have been doing is we have rolled out a program in 5 countries. And the platform is being used by Ministry of Health in 5 countries across all the population to monitor 3 different kinds of use case, right? The first one is monitor healthcare staff. Because as you have seen, almost 28% of all the COVID positive patients were in China, were healthcare workers and clinicians and nurses. In the US, it's almost reaching 20% raw. So continuously tracking frontline workers. The second one is patients in the isolation areas, to be able to continuously monitor them and be able to predict or detect exacerbation ahead of time to be able to intervene. And third is people who are quarantined at home, not yet positive, but have most likelihood of getting positive, and remotely monitoring them and managing them. And we'll soon publish our, some of our preliminary data. We have, we'll probably by end of this month have over 5,000 patients with COVID, currently monitored using the platform continuously 24/7. The duration ranges all the way from some 14 days, 30 days, etc. And what we will be essentially publishing is data to really demonstrate, few things. First is, give better understanding of the disease itself, how physiology has an impact on the disease, because that becomes critical, especially to drug companies, to really understand how physiological biomarkers potentially could be used as surrogate endpoints to speed up, drug approval process, or even to track efficacy and effectiveness of the drug. The second thing really is, as certain pharma companies or even diagnostic companies are building or rolling out PCR tests. And we essentially using our AI and analytics to develop a real-time early warning index, which essentially showed super high correlation with the PCR data, what we were capturing with patients, from patients on a day-to-day basis. And in fact, sometimes there were episodes where the PCR data was not confirmatory, not either negative, not either positive, and that has been one of the biggest challenges. And how do you have that high degree of sensitivity, specificity, but using continuous captured biometrics data correlating with clinical notes, annotations, becomes again a good learning for these diagnostic companies to continuously evolve their diagnostic tests. And finally, I think one of the things what we directly did, not with a pharma company, but very relevant. We worked with the Hong Kong University, which was our first rollout sometime in February, and they were testing a drug which essentially for patients or recovery of patients with COVID, not a vaccine, but a treatment to reduce the progression of disease. And in that study, they were using continuous biometrics monitoring with some of the endpoints to be more digital. Rather than your traditional endpoints, and that data will also be published with some impressive results on recovery rate and how the drug essentially performed. So very specific to COVID, but as you can see, it touches various parts of the healthcare system. Of course, pharma, but huge value right now. I think is for the health systems, and how pharma and technology can be combined together to solve for pressing clinical needs and healthcare inefficiencies, I think is a huge real world use case.
Thank you, Kuldeep. Loubna, would you like to proceed, please?
Thank you, Dario. So for me, I mean, the role of AI in healthcare in general, and with pharma in specific, if you look to pharma, when I started my company back in late 2015, I looked to the ecosystem and I said, look, if I'm going to work with hospitals, what is the scale? The largest hospital in Europe, number of thousands of patients, 3,000 maybe. But if you look to pharma companies, they've got the scale. Every pill, how many patients they take it worldwide. So if we can make sure that that pill goes to the right patients, we're going to solve a big problem. So, I mean, looking that the world population is increasing 10 billion by 2050, and how we can, allow access of healthcare for all those patients, how we can make our healthcare sustainable, it's a big task on our shoulders as a whole ecosystem. And pharma companies are one of these stakeholders that have that power and that can contribute to this mission. So, and that's, as an entrepreneur, I thought, okay, this is the industry I'm going to work with. I'm going to go work with life sciences. I'm going to build AI algorithms that will empower them to get that pill to the right patient. But if we go even bigger mission, if you look to healthcare, AI and healthcare share a lot of things in common. I was talking about the winters in the healthcare. It takes a pandemic or an epidemic to change the healthcare system. So the first epidemic, the cholera in 1832, we saw that in Europe, in France, the reform of healthcare started shaping. They started talking not about clinical medicine, they started talking about probabilistic medicine back in the 80s, 32. That's very long time. And it emphasizes prevention rather than the treatment, because as we witness today, to manage pandemic, we need, it's not about treating the symptoms, it's about having a plan to limit the spread and to provide equal healthcare for everyone. So that was the mindset, but unfortunately it failed because of some public healthcare movement and so on. So, and then we shifted to clinical medicine, to hospitalization, to specialties. But now with the new diseases and with the increasing size of the population, we realized this is not sustainable model. This is not a sustainable model. We need to change that. Now we have advancements in computing and machine learning, that we have computing that we can individualize, provide suggestions for what is the best treatment and for patients. And I think that is the big shift that's happening for pharma. And I believe this pandemic is an opportunity to shift the system and scale healthcare from clinical to probabilistic. And this is the time to also shift towards preventive and probabilistic medicine. So I believe that the combination of AI and machine learning and finance supporting this shift from specialization towards a more kind of wide and holistic approach to provide the right treatments for everyone. And as I said before, the way there, it's in steps, in phases. You cannot go and do it. You cannot jump, you know. We need to solve problem by problem. To get to productize and to get to deliver precision medicine, as Kuldeep was mentioning some aspects of that, we need to face the big elephant in the room. We need to be true to ourselves and say there is a big problem now with our healthcare system, with our ecosystem. Things are lost in translation. Life sciences took in a language, payers are talking another language, healthcare providers are talking a language. Everyone is in a tunnel vision. So we need first to take those walls. We need to solve that communication problem. Whatever smart drugs, whatever biomarkers we found, if we cannot solve this problem, they will never benefit the patients. So, and that's exactly what we're doing at Okra. So we're interfacing that problem, solving this communication problem. So when we have a new treatment in the market, and that is working for indication A with patient profile A, B, C, we need to explain that in a language that a doctor, a GP somewhere in a rural area would understand and start prescribing that new treatment to that patient. And that's how we empower field teams that they can talk that language using artificial intelligence. Also, identifying the prevalence of those patients in those areas and directing them. This is who you should talk to. This is what you should say. And this is why. Very simple language. Very, very smart AI, but very simple message to people to help them unlock and solve the problem. Secondly, around more advanced messaging. So when we have, we want to do research about some new indication or about existing indications, but then for very specific targets, we need to identify what we need to do, and we need to communicate with key opinion leaders, with investigators. But of course, we know we hire teams with PhDs, it's great, medical teams, but they need to communicate in a language that advanced medical research. Again, how can we, in simple layman terms for those professionals, say, this is the investigators you need to engage with, this is the key topics they are interested in, and this is the goal, this is why. So having decision support systems for medical liaisons officers, for medical affairs teams, so they can deliver an interactive, faster, by saving the amazing amount of cost that goes there and reducing the time to engage, that is crucial. And last but not least, for getting a drug in a country, payers, in the different countries, I know in the US it's a different story, but in Europe, every country has, a payer body, and we need to talk the language. We need to show what is the benefits of the population. Why is your treatment better than the standard of care treatment? So you can get the access for that market. Of course, as we want to make healthcare sustainable, we want to keep the costs sustainable for the different countries. So again, we need to go through that exercise, and we are launching next month a very one of our systems for value scope that is empowering market access professionals to do exactly that, to talk the language for the payers, to have early in phase 1, phase 2 prediction of what ranking and what price after launch they can get for those treatments, and start designing their studies in a way that they can show the benefits for the patient population in the different countries. So I think this is maybe, the less sexy problems, the boring problems, but this is how we can solve the big communication problem we have. And as I said, if we don't, and we only focus on getting precision medicine and getting the right biomarkers and getting the drugs, which is very important thing to do, we will never be able to scale it, which will be always stuck in the research domain. So we need to face as well those problems, and we need to empower the people to do their job and to shorten the time for that. So I think to conclude, I believe this pandemic is an opportunity for us to scale the use of AI, to reduce all those mundane tasks. We saw big shift of digital transformation using WebEx, using Zoom and other technologies to communicate. But I also believe this is the time to start using beyond just to communication of the face-to-face, but to drive the right messaging with the other stakeholders. So, and to make the shift finally after centuries to probabilistic medicine in phases.
Thank you, Loubna. Very interesting insights. Gernot, I think you have a very big challenge to give like a very good answer on that, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will give an answer also from my personal point of view and what I was observing at Novartis the last couple of years. And I think there it's really amazing to see a strong commitment of Novartis to data science since our current CEO Vas took over the reins about 2 years ago. I mean, he really sees Novartis now as a data science company, as a technology company, and he's very often talking about that. And I think this is really emphasized also by the hire 1.5 years ago of Sharam Ebadolahi, who was heading the data science department of a leading tech company, and he's now basically bringing this knowledge to a company like Novartis, which probably like 4 or 5 years ago no one would have ever thought about, but this is happening, and this could really happen. Talking about application at Novartis, there are actually many areas where we are currently looking into. They are also using the terminology Loubna was using, non-sexy topics we are trying to tackle. So I would say the non-pharma topics are probably the non-sexy topics to look into. Like in a large corporation, how can we improve the general efficiency? How can we support the procurement process? How can we lean it? How can we make it more transparent to people? But also the daily life problems of people using technology. I mean, how can we make the IT support easier? How can we make it? How can we proactively avoid incidents? How can we solve incidents? How can we dispatch it to the right person taking care of those things? How can we bring chat agents into the play? I mean, all of that are not necessarily directly pharma topics, but there are certainly topics which will increase the efficiency of a pharmaceutical company, that people can focus on the actual work and can focus to bring the drugs faster to the patient. But of course, there are also the, let's say, very sexy topics like drug discovery. I mean, this is one thing I think probably the most predominant thing people are talking about. How can we use our own data? How can we use data which is available to really come up with the next drug and bring it successful to the market? And there's actually a very large initiative at Novartis called Data 42. So for the people who are knowing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's exactly in this tapping to this topic. So how can we answer the question to everything? And so Novartis is lucky enough to have probably the richest set of patient data of most pharmaceuticals. So we have 2 million years of patient data available for exactly this approach, which is a great thing. Of course, we also partner there with other companies. And for example, we recently had a partnership announced with Microsoft. And I think this is also emphasizing really the direction we are trying to head to and becoming more of this tech data science company. Then, of course, there are also commercial applications. I think we heard many examples already. In our case, it's how can we support the sales force in the daily activities? How can we ensure that we identify the right ranges and areas to make a drug available? But this is also interesting, something where commercial, of course, connects then to the actual drug development process. And I think this is one thing which is also very often forgotten. I mean, we are very often talking about we need to find the right patients for clinical trials, but hey, I mean, there's a certain patient pool we identify from a commercial point of view. Why wouldn't we kind of connect those dots, and obviously patients taking part in clinical trial and a certain patient population in one region would then be the same customers basically, or the same pool of people to tackle at a later stage. Then, of course, in general, the whole creation of new drugs, the drug development process, there's a huge area, and my area of expertise in this regards is also more the clinical operations. How can we leverage our own internal data, enrich it with external data, and predict basically the best way to run those trials? And best way is not necessarily, or is not the most cost-effective way, but it's also how can we really achieve the fastest enrolling of clinical trials? How can we shorten the overall duration of those clinical trials to really give access to our patients in the most efficient and in the fastest possible way? But also things like increasing the footprint, going to new countries with those trials. All of that is coming into play there. Then, of course, areas like running remote trials. I mean, depending on the indication and the burden the disease is adding to the patients, patients are either not able to travel to a hospital, or they are probably not interested in traveling hours to a hospital and then getting their blood pressure measured before drug is administered and then 3 hours later again. So how can we ensure that we are using new technology to run those trials remotely completely? And there's also recently a very interesting application called Focal View, which has been released by Novartis. And this is basically allowing to take patients' digital versions of eye tests. And they're completed at specific times. And they measure ocular symptoms. And with this, you kind of measure the visual functions. You also capture and record how patients are feeling. And this currently only in very, very encapsulated areas, but still it allows basically to really run those trials completely remotely, which is, of course, then from a patient experience point of view, a big advantage and a big breakthrough. Regarding the question of COVID and application of AI in the COVID case, I would see this less in the commercial space, probably. I also think we are not there yet to develop really a cure in silico. But speaking in general of data science, I mean, epidemiology is I think the field where it has been proven and also shown in a very impressive way what can we achieve in just looking at the data. I mean, the whole concept of simulating what would happen if we don't intervene, and the whole concept of this flattening the curve, I think is based on those simulations. And without that, I think we would have been just completely overrun by the effect of a disease like COVID-19. And there are also, of course, then very specific use cases at Novartis. Like, for example, we did assess the impact of COVID-19 and the impact of not being able to enroll and recruit patients in the near future on the duration of our clinical trials, of the full clinical trial portfolio of more than 500 clinical trials running at the same time, with the application and of leveraging machine learning based on historic data, based on our personal inputs into this. So there are certainly many areas where we can really rely and benefit from the application of AI in pharma and life sciences.
Thank you, Gernot. Moving to the last question. We can start here with Loubna, because I believe she is having the best insights about particular digital transformation, and is actually AI part of digital transformation, or is it the opposite? My personal opinion is that actually digital transformation is part of AI, but please, Loubna, please let us know your insights and your opinion about that.
I agree. AI cannot be separated from the digital transformation in life sciences. Although we realized in this COVID that the digital world is a very bad substitute of the real world, but still, I mean, without the digital world, we cannot interact, and we cannot have, we can do things in much sustainable way. So they are inevitably linked, and digital transformation is based on making sense of all the tools we have and the data we have that is currently available, and using it proactively for a competitive advantage. And data and insights don't bring value by themselves. We need a way to leverage that, and the application is very key. We need systems that learn from this data, extract the value for it to support finally the teams that are doing the job, whether they are researchers or commercials or medical. So we need finally a system that delivers value, and value is not only linked to great insight. It is linked to how much efficiency is bring, how much increase in outcome is bring finally for the patient. I think that's the value, whether we're talking about commercial solutions, medical or clinical solutions. It's finally about how to bring the right treatments to the right patients, and the time matters, and how fast we can do that. So just an example from a commercial system, our called Field Focus, that reps are using to talk to doctors, and it's helping those time for sales reps make data-driven decisions around what doctors I should talk to, and how we should engage, and how we can educate them about the patients that are in need of those treatments. So so now with the COVID, for example, we also included the COVID data to be able to highlight where they should not be going, even if there is a high opportunity in there, that there are COVID cases, and that's at the point is important. So yes, AI is a part of digital transformation, and I think the part of the digital transformation today is what is not acceptable is a system that's not up to date. It's great that we can use AI, and it's great. For example, what Gernot mentioned about epidemiological models, it's great that we can run it at once, but they're snapshot. If they're not going to learn and adapt, then we are still, for example, the Imperial College paper that's been published with great work, but it was based on the data back then. A lot of things had happened, and did we take that into consideration? So now we're waiting when is the different prime minister is going to tell us what the strategy is going to be for the next period. But if we have a transparent solution that's learning from the data cross country, where it started in China and then Italy, and we got the learning, and we say, this is the best strategies, phase 1, this is what we need to do, phase 2, this is what we need to do, and just in different options, and see how much that will flatten the curve. I think that will be reducing uncertainty for people. See, okay, now I understand why I should be staying at home. Now I understand that maybe in next month we can start, releasing the measures. So I think it is within this digital transformation is also people are expecting the system to be smart enough to include the data up to date, and this is, I think, part of the period where we are. Having a system that's refreshed once a year, I don't think it's going to add value for the teams that are doing things on a daily basis. So I think that is part also of the digital journey, how we can upskill our people in this. Maybe the COVID period is the right time to do it, because everyone is at home, and this is the time to start integrating new solutions and teaching them about how to do things differently, to start using new tools, more advanced tools to support this decision. So closing this gap and using digital technologies and artificial intelligence to empower people to do things much more efficiently, and to focus their brains on the more heavy cognitive tasks that AI cannot solve today. I think that is definitely part of the digital transformation.
Thank you, Loubna. Gernot?
Being conscious about the time, I will try to keep myself very short, because I think in general, it also depends on the definition of digital transformation. And I think this is also, we could have a complete webinar just about answering this question. What is actually digital transformation? I think there are also very different opinions about that. But I think from what we consider digital transformation, at least I have the feeling that here in the panel, Loubna and Kuldeep and Dario, we are all sharing the same opinion about that. I think it became very clear that none of them can coexist without the other. I mean, AI is certainly one of the most important components for doing a successful digital transformation. And this is also coming back to the title of this webinar, which I really love. I don't think winter is coming to AI. I actually think we are still in winter, and the spring is approaching, because now people are really starting to understand what kind of value can it bring and how can we apply it in the proper way. So I think the best times are still coming to AI and a digital transformation.
Okay, thank you, Gernot. Just to ask Kuldeep, are you still online?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay.
I need to drop in a minute, but I echo what the panelists say. Digital transformation really depends on, I think, how do you define it, in what context, and what use cases, and for what industry. And I think AI, machine learning, and various digital technologies certainly are part of this whole digital transformation.
Okay, so then thank you very much, Kuldeep, also for the answer. With that final thoughts, I would like to welcome everyone who participated at our next webinar about AI. I'm pretty sure we will raise this topic once again in some of our future webinars. Thank you very much once again, Kuldeep, Loubna, and Gernot for joining. The webinar will be published also on our YouTube channel, so you can also watch it later on. Wish a nice rest of the day, and hope that you are actually stressing out the lockdown very soon, same as we did it in Croatia.
Yep.
Thank you very much, and have a nice rest of the day to all of you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Dario.
for having
Thank
me.
you,
Have a great day.
Dario.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.